Well, time to rattle the hornet's nest again. It's been 2 years since I made my first video about my thoughts on Has Been Hotel and Helluva Boss, and now that more episodes of Helluva Boss have been released, I guess it's time to talk about the show again. In my opinion, Helluva Boss is definitely an anomaly. With animation that is geared for an adult audience, there is a very conscious attempt to deliberately deviate from what is the standard expectation. Not to mention the fact that the majority of adult animation tends to be sitcoms based on, the nuclear family. Break the so-called norm just for the sake of it. Be violent because we can. Be full of sexual innuendos because we can. To me, Helluva Boss breaks the norm not just because it can, but because it has to. I mean, come on, the show is set in hell, the main characters are imps who are contracted killers. The violence and sex is integral to the story that the world is set in and for the characters. At the same time, to me, the violence is comedic, theatrical, and not done just for shock value, but done because they needed to do this to say, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is what you can expect from the show, so don't be shocked about it. At least that's what the pilot did. For an independent YouTube series, the show has quality that, as Saberspark said, defies YouTube. Its popularity defies all logic, especially considering that the YouTube algorithm usually works against independent animation, especially when it is geared for an adult audience. This is something I praise Vivzy Pop and her team for achieving. That being said, as popular as Helluva Boss is, it is far from perfect to me. It has strong and appealing character designs, and the animation is impressive for an independent YouTube show that doesn't have any studio backing, and it has creative freedom which studio-backed shows tend to lack, and are restrained from following the original creator's vision, usually. But to me, the biggest weakness of this show is its world building and the flimsy lore. I mean, there is world building there, and the lore is there, but it's not really strong enough to maintain the story or the characters to me. I mean that the lore building can't be the show's main pillar. As I said in my previous video about the show, fans can fill in the gaps of the lore by pulling from information read about the mythologies the show is based on, but that doesn't make it canon. And to get canonical answers, it seems that we have to dig through a lot of podcasts to get any questions answered. And as I said before, I don't think fans should have to look at supplemental material to get basic questions answered. Questions like, in this world, what is the difference between an imp and a demon? Other than species and class, I mean. The fact that Blitz and Stolas are in a relationship seems to be taboo in one episode, but perfectly accepted as normal in another episode. What is the difference between a hellborn soul and a soul of a human sent to hell? As interesting and varied as the designs are, I struggle to see differences that help fans to be able to tell who is a hellborn soul, like Charlie from Has Been Hotel, and who is a soul of a human sent to hell. Kind of nitpicky, I know, and maybe these questions will be answered in season 2, but to me, these are basic world building questions that I personally think should be answered in season 1 so we can make sense of how this version of hell works. Though this show is more character driven than anything and is the show's biggest strength. The personalities of these characters are really strong. They're really interesting and engaging and at some points relatable. This does serve to keep the viewers interested, I suppose, but it also means there's story plots that are just left hanging there. It seems to want to be more of a character study for Blitz, similar to what BoJack Horseman was, which would be interesting if Blitz was the main focus of the show, but it tends to hop around between Stolas, Blitz, and Moxie. I'm also a little confused as to whether this series wants to be an episodic series or one that is telling a season-long story throughout the series. Each episode seems to be self-contained, which is great, but then there's some episodes which end on a kind of cliffhanger to imply we will return to this story in another episode, which has not happened so far. So maybe this will happen in season 2. The order of the episodes also seem a little mixed up for me. For instance, episode 2 is focused on Stolas and his daughter, who are side characters. I would have moved this episode to maybe after episode 3 to give us time to get to know the main characters before giving Stolas development so early on. Though I definitely jumped the gun with my first 2 videos poking holes in the show that barely had time to lift off the ground. I feel that what I stated in my earlier videos still stands though. The lore of Helluva Boss and Has Been Hotel is still very flimsy to me. Perhaps Has Been Hotel will answer more questions once it's released. I don't think Helluva Boss is a bad show. I like this show, but just because I like a show doesn't mean that I'm blind to its flaws. The fact that most of the questions I ask regarding the lore and world building of the show are explained in supplementary material from the creator is incredibly frustrating to me. As previously stated, I don't think I should have to go digging through hours worth of footage from podcasts to get simple questions answered about something the show itself should have made time to answer. I'm probably going to return to this show once new episodes are released, so here's hoping some of my questions will be answered, and I'll try to be patient while waiting for the next episode. I'm Mad Munchkin, stay creative.